Situation post Warsaw Pact movement in turn 6. You can see it's still going for, attacks across areas, but something interesting's happening. These guys weren't too slow to get up to a unit. They're too weak. This has become sort of a defensive perimeter and nothing more than that. To some extent, I still have troops coming up. And by the way, I thought about chemical, but their best attack they could make, because they don't have the offensive chit with them, is on like the 3-to-1 table. Even with the chemical attack, I wouldn't really be pushing that as far as I'd like to. In a 7-to-1, it would be nice to blow a unit out of the way, but I don't know if it's 2 victory points nice. That's 2 cities this turn and every turn from now on. So there's kind of the, I don't know if I want to do the chemical attacks. The concept of why you're doing or not doing chemicals or nukes seems absolutely inappropriate. The thinking's based on victory points rather than tactical situation and possible political effects. So when you think about the possible political effects of the nuclear war, well, all right, look, there's a lot of metaphysical stuff you could get into about it, and you can say victory points make as much sense as anything. But the problem with the chemical is, if, as the designers state, there really is no reason that the Warsaw Pact would not use chemical, no political reason for it, etc. It shouldn't be baked into the victory point system the way it is. What it should be is just presumed, built into the victory points. Don't worry about what turn you do it in. That becomes then a strategic decision of the player in terms of when will it be most effective. You do it early, you get to use it all game long, but do you really want to waste your initial chemical attack on that? So here, I'm making a decision on when to apply chemical attacks, not based on the tactical situation at all, but based on this victory point cost to it that somehow gets greater the longer I play it. It's just a pure balancing factor to say, well, we don't want you playing as well as you can from the operational strategy here. What we want you to do is play as well as you can from the game point optimization within that strategy. And as far as I'm concerned, it's just silly to have put it where they did. They should just assume the use. I can understand not wanting to use them, wanting to maybe have an option that says, well, if you don't use chemicals all game long, you don't get this, or whatever. If you agree that you just don't want to use them, if that's, Soviet doctrine is not to actually use them. They're just a paper tiger, essentially. But, yeah, it is one of my disappointments. Anyway, number of attacks along the line. Some of these rear units, like this one and this guy, are not that good. These are lower category units, not frontline forces, and they just don't have the punch. Plus, some of the frontline stuff is wearing down. It's the attacks are getting harder to make in certain places. So, for example, here though, instead of just bypassing and marching into France, and France is coming in pretty soon, like this turn, I'm actually going for kills because I'm worried about the possibility of a counterattack at this point. I'm worried that the NATO alliance is actually going to be able to put up a fight pretty soon. And these out of supply guys, well, kind of garrisoning goods, may be able to throw some strength in somewhere or grab something, that's not defended. But they're shifting their axis in order to get to, this big hole I have around the 5th Corps area. With NATO having more airstrike capability, they went for a suppression attack here. That didn't work. They had enough operational to do a 2-point shot at that. And then they changed their doctrine on strikes. Instead of going for the more likely 2-point strikes, they went for the more numerous one-point strikes because there's so many Soviet units in lousy terrain, in nuclear terrain, that I can hit. Unfortunately, I rolled pretty badly. Then again, for the Soviets, I rolled pretty badly too. So not a lot of units were wrecked. A little bit of softening going on. This unit here, and at least one Soviet unit got hit. And now we launch the attacks. Looks like there's an attack here, but there actually isn't. We're just hitting these two, I think. Over here, we're hitting this little space here near Dusseldorf. I don't know what that is. And then the key attack here, with this being ignored. You know, just in some places, I'm just throwing troops to get forward, to put some hindrance on the opponent. Still can't see any reason for using interdiction. This may be a failing of mine, but I just have not seen a game purpose of it. I've tried it a couple of times in my early plays and couldn't find any value. Mixed results for the attacks. Slammed through over here well enough, although I took some losses, nothing too major. But here I miscalculated or forgot to count, actually. And hitting this hex, this had like 12 strength points in it. Even with my improved attack capability, I was looking at like the 6-to-1 table with, I believe that's a major city or a key under there. So that would be a -3 on the table. I was just unwilling to take that Essen. So instead I attacked these rail mounted British units just from this hex, ignoring this one. I couldn't get a good attack here over either. And that didn't work out terribly well. I got essentially in exchange one of these 1-1s. They each have a defense of 1 no matter what because they're on rail, but that's no biggie when they're weak anyway. For one of my para unit, airborne units. Over here, though, things went quite well. I destroyed the entire German unit without any losses. You can see some exploitation. I think I should have used chems this turn. Just, it would have busted this up probably, and some of the other attacks. So we're going to see him probably coming into play next turn. But here's the problem. If I'm near the end of my flow, and now I use the chems, I'm basically saying, okay, you know, I can extend my offensive by a couple of turns, and that might be enough to make up for the points that I spend on the chemicals. But, you know, the 8-turn game, I'm here in the substantial victory realm right now. But to get it up to the decisive, the 51, that's going to cost me. I still think I'm going to do it. Shake things up a little bit. Things are going to shake up no matter what. Either this game becomes kind of a stalemated situation with the NATO troops coming in. NATO actually has the capability to launch counterattacks at this point. With the French coming up, not a lot of them, but you know, some additional strength points. They have the capability to hunt down weak spots in the Soviet line, like here, and actually punch through if they can keep a small force to use for attacking. Alternatively, probably their better move is to fortify their line everywhere they can. And I mean, if they see one that doesn't cost them any real positioning, it's worth hitting. But killing Soviet troops, the Soviets are good enough at doing that. So that's one way the game could change. But if the chemicals come in, we sort of keep rolling the same way, but we get to see some new factors. And we also maybe get to see nukes if the chemicals are really successful. Most of those reserves coming in were West German territorial units. Their territory's been overrun, so they're in a bigger dead pile. It's not really a big deal because they're only 1 strength point units. These guys have a rule, and I've broken it here with the Dutch. They can't leave their home territory. I'm going to pull that back because of that. I was going to pull it back anyway, but I got to be more careful. Because I got these Dutch and Belgians, I got the French, a lot of territorial units. They're going to be useful along the Rhine. But it's absolutely, you know, I shouldn't be throwing them into the main NATO line here like I was with the Dutch. the losses are to be expected. It just means that, what I'm getting here is usually not that impressive. I've got one more big division coming in. So we're not really seeing a huge influx of troops. So Warsaw Pact is going to keep their overall advantage, I think. Warsaw Pact points in the high 40s. What we see over here is it's going to be almost impossible to give up any more ground. Anything else I give up, I'm going to be guaranteeing them pretty much that marginal victory by the end of the game. Even if I can hold them, even if I go to nukes, it's got that kind of problem. And that's really troublesome. I mean, I can give up ground here as I've done, but can I afford to give up Munster? That's another point. Can I afford, to give up this little piece here? What about Darmstadt, when I would rather be defending behind the river line at Mainz? There aren't many places I can give up. I can give up a handful, three of those tiny, of those minor cities. And that means no breakthroughs, nothing anywhere. Ouch. I have to hold Frankfurt. Well, how do I hold Frankfurt without Darmstadt? All right, well, I pulled the offensive chit off in the chance that maybe I'll get an opportunity to use it somewhere else next turn. I certainly can't use it with the West Germans this turn. I've got to put a big defense here at Erfurt. It's out in the middle of nowhere, likely to get destroyed. Frankfurt, some defensive line there. I've got to concede part of the Rhine. Couldn't get enough troops right up to cordon the river completely. So there's possible Soviet incursion there. The biggest problem, though, the Netherlands. There wouldn't be enough troops to hold the northern German plain anyway. Falling back into the territorial positions, though, I mean, I've got a headquarters defending a location alone. Basically, it's one strength point units everywhere. That's worth a lot of points. I don't think even with nukes, I think I've waited too long to drop the nukes in this one. I don't think even with nukes that I can stop a Soviet advance. But at least I could move some of the commitment here, the 6-point defensive stacks, etc., that are in place to prevent an overrun right now of this major victory point source, and maybe cover some of the Netherlands. I don't see why the Soviets are going to need to use chemicals unless nukes are used. And if nukes are used, well, chances are my headquarters aren't going to manage to stop to exist long enough to use the chemicals for any effective purpose. So chances are what we're seeing here is what may be one of the last turns of the game before I try to trigger the nukes. It's pretty much fighting along the same lines. A little push across the Rhine here. Hit these entrained units. Most of them aren't really reduced by it. A slow advance here. Trying to eliminate these couple of units there rather than running forward. No use of chemicals. I feel like I'm close enough to victory. I don't want to chance things by putting that extra victory point burden on myself. And then with airstrikes, not a lot of success there. Once again, the NATO alliance tried to knock out one of the support units and failed. And then actual strikes had very limited effect from both sides. NATO again spreading out their attacks on the plains, bad die rolls. Same thing really for the Soviets. I think these dice have been rolling pretty low all game. Maybe they're unbalanced. I don't know. I was using them in Famous Victory, and they felt fine for the use that I had there. So who knows? But I've definitely seen a lot of bad results on the attack table and a lot of iffy results on the airstrikes. Anyway, we'll do the quick attacks here, see what we can clean out of them. Well, you know, limited objectives, but even so, I didn't carry out this attack without a support marker. I just didn't have the odds. I did carry out one low odds attack here. Even with the surrounding, that ended up 5-1. Major city, so -3. I got a lucky roll there, actually, only causing a step to each. I wasn't sure. I didn't realize I had the -3 before I rolled the die, so I let it stand. But it wasn't a bad result at this point in the game. The big thing, though, is all this empty space here. I just do not feel like NATO thinks that they can survive this. So, guess what time it is? Time to soak the map in lighter fluid and set it on fire. Seriously, you know, maybe. We're going to declare a nuclear war. At least we're going to open up with a tactical nuclear exchange. Now, the biggie with that is, do we get to keep playing or not? And, of course, if we don't, will I at least show an example of a little bit of the tactical, which I will. But the first thing we're going to see here is on a 1 through 3, NATO loses. Bang. Soviets launch a full strike against them. The thing is, I'm seeing breakthroughs here across the Rhine, and that really is my triggering point. But I see very little hope of holding any of this. We're going to look at a massive victory for the Soviets if I don't stop it. Boom, game's over. All right, but ignoring that for the moment, I will show a little bit of the results of what that all means, just because this is a nice long video. There's a lot of room left on this video. So now we're going into the post-game situation. What if I had rolled a success? I'm not going to play out the whole rest of the game, but I do want to show a little bit of how the nuclear system works. Unfortunately, you didn't get to see the chemical system at play. I just couldn't justify using it because of the victory point decisions. It looked like the Soviets are going to win without it. Okay, so it's time for the first strike. And for this, I've gotten rid of some things. All the reinforcements that come in by air, boat, the rail reinforcements are going to move to road. Everything gets delayed by at least 2 turns. All this is very painful for NATO because they're the ones with the reinforcements still out there. All air points are destroyed. Probably a mixed bag there. Again, NATO's coming to the advantage there. All rail movement is destroyed. Again, NATO's disadvantage there. This is assuming that the game hadn't ended, of course. Now we do the first strikes, and I've basically got 16 shots. I'm going to devote 14 of them to trying to take out Soviet nuclear capability. That way they can't wipe me out because I want to do as many hits as I can. Now, the harder ones are, of course, the mobiles. So let's go for the fixeds first. Over here, we need a 2 or higher. There's no modifier for the first strike here. We just get the advantage of firing first. So a 2 or higher on each one. All right, we got all but one of their fixed shots, and now I've got 8 of these to fire. Now these are a lot harder to hit. I need a 6 to hit the mobiles. That means they're going to be doing damage to me too, taking out my fixeds. But I want to get as many of these as possible off the board. That's 1. And that's all I'm allowed to do there. I'm not allowed to double up, I don't believe. All right. So now I had 16. I think I have 2 left, 2 shots left. I want to hit stacks where there are headquarters, presumably, or preferably, ones where there's support markers. So I'm going to hit this headquarters and this one. This one has a Oh, I don't think I'm allowed to nuke cities. I'm not sure. Yeah, I don't see a rule on that in this. Must be in Central Front series. I often conflate the two games because they cover the same concept. And the idea of using tactical nukes against West German centers of population seems a bit unlikely for NATO doctrine, but who knows when things are this bad, what would happen. So here, well, using a nuke says I get to hit the whole stack. These don't much matter anymore. The important one is really the headquarters. That's the one I want to hit the most. So that's going to be a soft target with no terrain modifiers here. Soft target says I need a 2 or better to kill it. Oops, that sucks. No other soft targets. I got 3 hard targets. Actually, I've got 5 hard targets because each step is its own. And these are going to take 3s. So we'll go for 1 there. Nope. 2 over here. And 2 in the other unit. Okay. The dice, feel a little weak. And then I'm going to continue with this stack. We got a soft target, but there's a -1 here, so we need a 4 or higher to kill that off. And we get that. And I believe this gets recharged to next turn. This is about the only way you can get rid of headquarters, unless somebody leaves it out somewhere stupid. And now these are against hard targets. And where were these suckers? I think they were down here. Okay. So you can see where that's going to slow down the Soviet advance. It's not going to stop it right away, though. We'll play out a little bit more to see what that effect is, because now these guys are all pretty much out of supply. They no longer have an army to command them. So you can see where that's going to be a problem. It's going to slow down their movement, and it's going to reduce their ability to attack. But still, they have some potential left. Hitting something like this would have been key, because this is kind of the heart of the Soviet advance. Likewise up here, if I could stop these guys from moving. But I think the Netherlands is going to fall anyway. Like I said, I pulled the trigger too late. You really have to do it before you're losing. Okay, not listed on the chart is that +1 bonus. It is actually listed over here. Like with the initial bonus that the Soviets get on the first turn of the game, I like games to have all the information in the rules and all the really kind of useful information in the charts. If you're going to present a chart, present the information that you need for modifiers on it. This game has a really disturbing tendency to have it in one place or the other. In some places there's information, like on the terrain effects chart, that isn't really well described in the rules. And then there's stuff like this, where there's a modifier to the chart that's not on the chart. Personal gripe, I'll leave it as is. NATO should have done a slightly better job in terms of their attacks because of the first strike. And those tactical nukes didn't do anything to help NATO's situation on the ground particularly. I shifted some more forces into the key Rhine industrial area, weakening the line here. These units, I feel like I'm facing them with too much power. With units of the 5th Corps, which are essentially untouched. But I can't really shift things. I can't use any kind of strategic road movement or anything like that anymore because I've used the nukes. I probably should have shifted this unit out of here before that. I've got ground I can give there. I kind of want to hold Frankfurt. That's a 3-point location. But, you know, with things like Darmstadt, with the crossing here at Kaiserslautern, I don't see being able to prevent, what is it, the 50 points that's the marginal victory. The question is only, can I stop that 61 points by the end of the game? And I think the answer to that is maybe. It depends on whether or not I can stop this advance here. If I can't stop the advance into the Netherlands, I'm screwed. But I just don't have the troops to hold this area, which I would be totally screwed if I lost, and to hold this area. And I don't have any flexibility really to move things. I can't do strategic, even before the nukes, I can't do strategic movement of any type to get things from here. Now, I could have pulled stuff from here or here, given up Frankfurt to screen this. That might have been a reasonable option to throw the defenses into the Netherlands. But, you know, Frankfurt falls, then there's a crossing here threatening Bonn. And there's just too much to cover with what the NATO has at this moment. One of the things I sort of promised you about the nuclear exchange, the Russians came back, they wiped out all the fixed point NATO nuclear points, but I didn't manage to get any of the mobiles. I aimed for them. I want to cut down their ability to knock out my headquarters, because that's what they're going to aim for, is all my headquarters spaces. The one thing that I kind of promised is, hey, once the headquarters are gone, you're going to see the Soviet advance pretty much halted. I'm not sure how much that's going to be the case because of the Netherlands situation. I don't want to keep going with this. I don't see much point to it. The Soviet line is just going to ram through here. There's not much I can do except shift strength away from here. And really what it comes down to is you'll see things like this, where if there's any resistance whatsoever, the Soviet Warsaw Pact units cannot keep going forward. I was able to expend one of my offensive supports. I put it here because I had already done all my movement. These guys might have been able to launch an attack maybe against these West Germans, but then that opens up the possibility of something stupid happening, like, you know, NATO forces breaking through and rushing into East Germany for points to try to, because this is essentially over. Now, if this were the eight-turn game, that would be almost assured to happen. Right now we're at 54 points, which, if this were the 8-turn game, would get us the decisive victory. Now, of course, I would have launched the nukes earlier in that case. And that's actually what I did wrong. My experience with this game, I don't know how many times I've played it, maybe 10 times or so, at most. Maybe a little more, because maybe I played it a little heavier when I first got it. Except for maybe one playing where perhaps I got really bad luck with the Soviets. My experience has been, it is always impossible for NATO to really hold the line anywhere. I've tried deeper defenses. Too many points get scored early on by the Soviets. I've tried what I tried this time, a more forward defense, because I think, you know, that allows me to get my reinforcements and keep them in play that I think I'm going to need. I've tried, at the very least, the extended and the strategic surprise. I may have tried the tactical surprise as well. I'm not sure. Most of my experience has been with the extended build-up, because I get to use all the pieces. And the one thing that I learned, if you want to win the game as NATO, your best chance, at least if you're me, is turn 1 or turn 2, as soon as they cross the border, hit them with the nukes. And that is a terribly uninteresting game, because very quickly you see the Soviet forces degrade. This turn, well, we may keep firing at the mobiles, but I think I'm going to start aiming at the headquarters just to knock them out. to show you what kind of, force. Nah, I'm not going to bother. But basically, you can prevent Warsaw Pact from having any ability to advance very, very quickly. It takes a couple of turns, and they're degraded to just not being able to play. Now, I've seen that happen where I dropped the nukes a little earlier in the game. And it's impressive. Sometimes Warsaw Pact can eke out a victory at that point because I've waited too long. So the obvious answer is, let's make it 50-50 because you're not going to have that chance any other time in the game. Do it on the first crossing. And then, for that, the game kind of loses some of its value as a game. It's going to be decided by a die roll on turn 2. NATO can assure themselves a 50-50 chance of victory then, and I don't think they can do that at any other point in the game. Maybe turn 3 if they nuke, whatever. But if they unless you're playing against an incompetent Warsaw Pact player, I think it's almost impossible for NATO to pull a victory. Now, I think I have pulled one, but like I said, I think it's the rare case. Anyway, that's what I did wrong as NATO, in terms of playing it as a game. As a simulation, well, it may be kind of interesting, actually. It's just the game doesn't kind of ask for that. I'll be back with most of those thoughts pretty much repeated as a review as soon as I clean it up. Up it goes.